All right, good afternoon, everybody. If we'll go ahead and start settling down, we'll get this committee meeting rolling. If everybody just take a second and get settled in. All right, I think we got it. We've gotten everybody settled in and started. We'll go ahead and call this meeting, or allow me to go ahead and call this meeting of the House Higher Education Committee to order. We have 4 items on the agenda for discussion today. We won't be voting any of these 4 items, but we have House Bill 122, House Bill 130, House Bill 163, and House Bill 185. The author of 185 has specifically requested to go at the end of the agenda. Representative Gamble, Representative McDonald, do y'all have y'all okay with us? I see Representative Gamble. You okay? We'll just go in the batting order we have and go with Chairman Hawkins if you guys can. Okay, we'll just stay with that. With that, we'll go to House Bill 122. What we have in our packet is LC 540130. With that, Chairman Hawkins. You can stand up. You're welcome to do that. I know you've been. You're yes, sir. You're on injured reserve. So come right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me, if you can. I think we did have a sign-up sheet out there.
Right there.
If anyone would like to continue to do that, they can. We'll operate this in a very public way, so you'll get an opportunity if you're here and you haven't signed up. We'll do that as well. Chairman Hawkins.
Okay, thank you. House Bill 122 is a follow-up on a bill we did in 2016, the ABLE legislation. I'm just going to give you a little bit of history about that because some of you are probably unaware of that. And I'm going to ask the Treasurer to speak to his idea that he called me about 2 years ago on improving this bill and improving it for the participants that use this. I got involved probably 20, 30 years ago. I had a good friend, Roger Owens, who's a physician. His son was run over and crippled, one road over from where we live. Very smart boy, but was a partial quadriplegic. We, through our church and other organizations, raised money to build a house or buy an old house. It's called Randy's House. Did the same thing with Rachel's House for young women. The idea was that they wanted to live apart from their parents, at least try. So this gave them that opportunity. And I was talking to Randy's mom one day, and they had started a bookstore so they could all work. But they can only work about 2 hours a day. Then they come back and watch television. They were really not happy about that. But there's a requirement of no greater than a $2,000 asset limit for Medicaid and SSI. So the federal government, 2014, I guess, I think 2014, passed legislation called the ABLE, a Better Life Experience. It allows these folks or their families to put in $14,000 a year, thereby bypassing the $2,000 limit, a total of $235,000 in a 529A account. Similar to the Higher Education Savings Fund, these things, the money could be used for things that the disabled needs. Ramps, be able to rent a house and renovate it so they could use it, a number of things. We ran into a situation where it was very costly for the parents, and it's usually the parents taking care of these young folks, to contribute to this account and at the same time pay for all the accounting and business requirements of the account, because we wrote the bill so the state was not at risk with this. So the accounts were put into with other states in Ohio. Well, it has not grown particularly quickly. It's out of sight, out of mind. And so 2 years ago, our state treasurer called and said, I've got an idea that I think that will really help this. So I'm going to ask him to speak to it. And then we have two other folks here that are going to speak. One from BHDD and then Commissioner Nigel from DCH. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. That Georgia, there are two 529 plans for the state.
Just identify yourself again
I'm
for those
sorry.
that are listening to us online, if you will.
Thank you,
We
sir.
know you.
Steve McCoy, State Treasurer. And I'm also the administrator for both the ABLE program and the Path to College Savings Program. Georgia, the IRS allows tax-exempt savings plans for two uses. One is for college savings, which has now been expanded to other, including apprenticeships in K through 12, but where families can save tax-exempt for educational purposes. And also it allows, as Representative Hawkins had mentioned, it allows for savings for families with disabilities or individuals with disabilities, tax exempt. Both of them fall under the same IRS code. We have two separate boards that administer each program. And it's almost the best of worlds and the worst. Path to College is our college savings plan, and it's probably the top plan in the country. It's the lowest cost in the country, one of the fastest growing in the country. It is right now we're at a little over $4 billion in assets, almost 219,000 accounts. It has a great plan that's carried out as far as marketing and outreach by the Georgia Student Finance Commission. I know President Riley is in the audience. She oversees the marketing and outreach for that program. They do a great job. And that program is stellar. However, the ABLE program, that we do not have a team to do outreach for it. We do not have resources for outreach, and it is what we did to have an ABLE program is we partnered with Ohio, and Ohio actually runs a program. They white label it for Georgia. It's called the Georgia Stable Program. And 11 other states followed us in doing that. Ohio now has 13 states in there to consolidate their program. But it's we still we have 1,870 accounts and $15 million in assets, and it's not growing very well because we don't have the outreach to let families know. We don't have the resources to do that. What this bill does is it takes both programs and puts them under the same board, the Higher Education Savings Plan Board, so that the board that oversees the College Savings Plan, which is a fabulous plan again, it puts both programs there. It will create operational efficiencies where we do not have to operate both separately, and that we both from on the ground outreach we can be more effective there. Also from social media and others, that the way the College Savings Plan is really continuing to grow, even in 2020 and 2021, it continued to grow extremely well. So we think consolidating those two with one board will create the efficiencies. The board, the legislation itself, it accomplishes that. It just pulls both programs under one board. It does expand the Higher Ed Savings Plan Board to add the commissioner of the Department of Community Health and also Department of DBHDD. It also takes the governor off the board. He's asked to come off the board when we do this, and that it adds a member to the Higher Ed Savings Plan Board that is associated with, either has a disability or associated with organizations supporting the disabled. And that it also does one other thing. It increases the cap. The cap on the College Savings Plan has been $235,000. It's been there since 2001, I think, maybe 2002. Hasn't been adjusted. And what this does, it allows the board to adjust that as needed to be in line with other states in the cost of education. Thank you, sir.
Complete the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you would at this time, we'll stop and ask the committee if they have questions. If there's not a question, if you don't have a question now, we can take testimony and we'll come back to questions. Number 26, is that Representative Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Treasurer, appreciate you being with us. Appreciate what y'all are doing for this community as it currently exists. If we remove the cap, what do you think it should be right now?
That I probably would not be the best one to address it. What we'll do is have someone review all the other states and look at the cost. IRS allows each board to determine the amount based on their state and their intent. So Georgia's was initially established, if I wasn't treasurer at the time, but based on 4 years of education in any college, not any private and public school. Since then, the program's been expanded to include, like I say, K through 12. So I would not like to kind of venture what the board may determine on that. I know that they'll review what other states are and see what adjustments would need to be made. I don't have a feeling for what it would be. It would be a board decision.
Thank you.
Representative Glaze.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Treasurer, that's very much my concern of where do we cap out. And with the board having their own ability to vote that in, and it's been tied to other factors, I would love to see if there would be some factors that we could tie in. Do you have any suggestions?
Mine would be really the 529 plans are open to people in any state. So, for instance, a Georgia resident can invest in the South Carolina plan if it offers advantages over Georgia. South Carolina residents can invest in Georgia's. So I would think the board would look at other states and how did they determine theirs, what were they trying to achieve, and then look to see whether or not Georgia's plan is disadvantaged by having a cap lower than their peers. But so I don't have a number. But I know that we'll do a review of all the other states and present it to the board for their consideration.
Mr. Chair, may I follow up with one quick question? So with that being stated today, is there not opportunity to make suggestions so that we have some kind of minimal requirement of the things that we should look at to include in that as a cap, such as apprenticeships K through 12? Is there opportunity to do that, to at least put some research behind it?
Yes. Now I know we're not an agency that uses a lot of consultants, but on the 529 plan, we do use a consultant named AKF Consulting. That's all they do is 529 plans. They work with probably about maybe a little over half the states, and so they'll have the data and research on what the other states are doing and why. And so we'll definitely review that, look at it, and then present that to the board. This will be a new board composition when they meet, so we'll present it to the new board when they meet, and I'm sure they'll take that into consideration. Up till now, it has not been a big disadvantage to Georgia as far as the cap, but with the looking at having to come back and adjust it periodically, it's really held up just at the same level as its peers. I think we may be the lowest cap in the country right now.
Well, we certainly like both of the programs. They're necessary. We like the expediency and the efficiency that you've suggested, and certainly there needs to be an increase, but I certainly would like some, maybe a AKF, if they would just give us some information on that. That would be helpful, because I'm sure they can include all of those and give us some, at least a range, and why.
All right.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? We'll go on to the other testimony. I have a yes, sir.
Can I say something to that? That was a good question. This bill was passed last year by the House. We had the limit in there, 235. Senator Mac Brass over on the Senate side consulted with various folks and felt like that the limit should be in the purview of the board. They made the amendment to the bill and passed it also unanimously on the Senate side. But what happened to the bill was then it was amended with some education legislation, and your chairman was very, very helpful to me about trying to get that thing back. And the feet were drugged. We didn't get it back till 10 o'clock, and I made the decision to not go to the chairman and, the speaker and put another rock on his wagon that late at night about pulling it up. So that's what happened. Yeah.
Yes, Representative Kelly, you got another question before we move on?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to have to ask you to come back to me. I was just trying to read through everything, and it took me a little while to get to the last page. But can you speak to lines 152 through 155 and striking the provision to collect fees and charges? Can you speak to that section for me and the necessity of it? Or the lack thereof, since we're striking it?
Yes, sir. That was in the original language that, and it was an IRS requirement that the legislative council, when we were reviewing and putting this together, initially the question I was asked is, we can't control that as long as right now we are, it's essentially Ohio's plan labeled for various states. And so they have to determine they have to meet the IRS requirements. The IRS can change these requirements over time. And so that requirement is already picked up is that if we have to operate the program in adherence to the 529 regs by the IRS, so Ohio is responsible for that. We could not have this in ours and then they adjust all the other states. We would have to lose our plan. So we would not be in compliance at that point. So this is it was put in when it was a model legislation at the time when states were adopting the ABLE legislation, and now states have moved away so that it's not, you don't have one that's stagnant if the IRS changes its regs.
Okay, thank you.
But we're operating under the Ohio plan now
Yes, we are.
with that language.
Yes. No, we're operating under the plan. I'd have to check. I'm sure that I shouldn't comment on that. I don't think the IRS has changed that. But as far as any penalties, we'd have to check with Ohio and see if that is something.
Well, there's the penalty section, but I mean, again, the gentleman asked that you're striking language that requires there be fees, require and collect fees to cover the reasonable cost of administering the accounts. Why that language is being stricken?
So we do not charge anything on the accounts. It doesn't, and so we don't collect anything. We don't charge anything for Georgia. They're part of the Ohio plan, and so any fees that are charged by Ohio, I do not believe that they're charging any, but any fees they would charge would be in compliance with the IRS code and set by the Ohio.
Where does the money come to administer the plan currently?
Ohio has an appropriation, and they're running this with their appropriation.
So there are no management fees
Yeah,
into the
now,
plan?
The plan itself is administered by Ohio through an appropriation. They have a team in Ohio. They provide the website for each of the states that's partnering with them. They pass through the same cost to the account holders. The account holders are charged a fee on the investments that the investment options they choose. It is not enough to cover the cost of the program by far. That's why other states, there are only 4 overall plans in the country because they're very expensive to operate. Ohio is the only one that I'm aware of that's doing it at no cost to the other states to participate. Others are trying to share the cost.
Well, to follow up on that, and I'll do it in the form of a question since we're not there. I don't want to debate the bill at this point, but isn't it true that what I'm concerned about, even though it may be a small number, is us moving a plan over into the 529 and taking money out of somebody's college savings plan, even though it may be very minor. If we're not doing that, just let me finish. If there's no cost to that, I just, if we as a state want to do that, I'm fine with us spending state appropriations, but I don't want to take anybody's grandchild's college money, even though this is a very laudable firm. So if that, and you're shaking your head that we're not doing that, I'll take your word on it.
I should have made that clear. These are both to be consolidated under the same board, but they'll be separate programs. College savings programs completely separate from ABLE, so there's no commingling at all. There'll be different investment options that completely. Georgia controls investment options and the cost for the Path to College program that will offer the same options that Ohio offers as long as we're tied with them. Over time, Georgia could create its own ABLE program, and then we would have control of that.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? We'll go on to testimony. Dr. Harkins, you had a couple people that wanted to speak to that other than you. You guys, if the other folks don't mind speaking from the podium, you're welcome to hold your place. Ms. Knockler, are you going to speak to us?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Kaylee Noggle, I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Community Health. I've had the pleasure of serving on both of these boards. I'm currently a member of the ABLE Board in ex officio capacity in my role as Commissioner of Community Health, but I previously served on the 529 Board as a member, or excuse me, when I was the president of the Georgia Student Finance Commission. And just here to echo and reiterate what Treasurer McCoy and Representative Hawkins have both said, these boards are actually very similar. They serve different populations in terms of either individuals with disabilities or students, but they serve the same purpose. This is a investment vehicle where we as a state are encouraging folks to save for both their current and future expenses. So the functions of the boards are actually very similar in terms of managing those investment accounts and making sure that we're good stewards of those monies, and then promoting the outreach and education to Georgians that these options are available and making sure that they're being maximized for their use. So just here to support that and say that the boards would actually find some efficiency in doing that. But happy to answer any questions, sir.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Noggle? Thank you very much. And we had one additional person or no? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. They're all on the list. Dr. Jeff Thompson? Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You guys were ahead of me. You were on the list.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name's Dr. Jeff Thompson. I'm the Director of Community Services at the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. I've been with the department since about 2017. And I come before you today to speak on behalf of DBHDD in full support of House Bill 122. Through my office, we do trainings on stable accounts, how to make those happen, and the benefits for the people we serve. A majority of the people we serve at DBHDD can benefit from these accounts. One of our programs is supported employment. And you can imagine if there's a resource cap of $2,000 that it may be challenging to stay within that area, and to be able to put money into these accounts for disability-related needs is really a benefit to the folks we serve. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the gentleman? Dr. Thompson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we've already heard from you, Mr. McCoy. You were signed up, and you were the literal right hand of Chairman Hawkins as well. So that concludes the people we had signed up. I'm going to do what I often did before in local offices. We want to have a full and complete discussion on that. So rather than simply ask, are you for, if there's anyone that wishes to speak for or against the bill, I'll say if you wish to speak for or against, or you're not sure about this, you just want to make a comment, we'd like to invite you to come forward at this time. To be clear, while you're welcome to come forward and make your statement and stay and answer questions, that is not a requirement. It will never be a requirement for this committee. If you wish to, you make a statement and choose not to stand for questions, that's absolutely fine. We don't want to chill anybody's opportunity to speak before the committee. Anybody wish to speak to this item before the committee? Before we go back to the committee for questions? Anyone wish to speak? There are no speakers at this time. I want to follow up with a couple of questions for you, Mr. Chairman, and for the state treasurer. In the bill, it talks about the board as it moves over. The new board would entertain obligations of the old board. Can you, when we bring this back for action, won't ask you today, but what any of those might be? I don't know that there are any, but that's always, what we have is sort of a reverse merger here. When I'm looking at the bill and you have a $15 million outfit overtaking a $4 billion outfit when you look at the new makeup of the board. So I just want to make sure that we don't, you have, Martin Incorporated acquiring Microsoft here. So I just want to make sure that we're doing that. So if you could bring that forward. You're welcome to speak to it now.
There's only one obligation that it has, is that is the contract with the state of Ohio. And it can be terminated with 6 months with no cost by either side.
Okay, so that's fine. And then, again, this is, we can get together before we get back again, but you talk about, operational efficiencies. Besides I think each board meets once annually, correct? But besides those operational efficiencies, if you could detail, or give us some reasonable, not form over function here, just it doesn't have to be PowerPoint presentation or anything, but just to explain to the committee what additional operational excellence we're driving from doing this, besides just the board has to meet one board has to meet instead of two boards have to meet. And then the last thing I would like to discuss with the chair, Chairman Hawkins, is the board makeup. And I'm just going to say this, publicly, because I want to look you right in the eyes, Mr. McCoy, when I say this. I have pause with you being on the board and the vice chairman of the board if you're the administrator. We ran into that previously in some places where we had a person that was charged with the administration of an area and was the chair of the board that oversaw it. So I'd like to just talk about that with no, I just want to look you right in the eye and say that that's not directed at you personally. It's just completely operational. Sometimes there's a good place to set those items, because you're already attached to the board administratively, so you would attend any of the board meetings and that sort of thing. But with that, those are the questions that I'd like to work with you on, Chairman Hawkins, before you come back, and then open it up for any other questions, and then we'll let you close, Mr. Chairman. Number 10? Yes, sir. Representative Jackson.
Let me apologize for being late, and I came in the middle of the presentation, and but please, I apologize for all of that. But when you're talking about boards, who will be selecting the board members to serve? And you say this program is out of Ohio, and maybe I'm hearing it wrong because I did come in late. Who will determine the makeup of the boards that you're combining two, so some will lose and some will win?
Yes, ma'am. I'll take that, Mr. Just as we're in this. Representative Jackson, yeah, that would be the governor as it's currently drafted in the bills, really on at a macro level, lines 16 through 39, particularly 23 through 30, the governor of the state. So the board would stay in Georgia, and I think the only person that you're looking here is removing from the board is the governor at this point, right? So that would stay in Georgia. The lady
Thank you.
have further
I
questions?
didn't read the bill.
No, that's fine. Everybody's very busy in here. That's a good question when you're talking about. I think we're just leveraging the plan out of Ohio because we're so small in terms of assets. It'd be very expensive to try to move and get a good return on that investment.
You're absolutely right. What they're doing is they're taking the ABLE board, the 529 Path to College board, and adding folks that would help with disability, DCH, BHDD, and a family member or a member with disabilities. So that's, you got the 529 Path to College board, adding these people, and that's your new board. So it's blending the boards. But, yeah.
I have no further questions. I did when I flipped over to do this. So you have on lines 49 and 50, a reasonable amount is determined by the board based on current and anticipated. And you feel like from the IRS perspective, that gives you a safe harbor to work within, Mr. Treasurer? I mean, you know that we wouldn't put anything in there that would get people sideways with the IRS, I guess is what I'm asking. The board would be smart, would be wise to the IRS regulations. I'm seeing other people that have done this back there on your boards nodding their head as well. So that would provide the families a safe harbor so that they know that they wouldn't be getting sideways with our friends up in Washington, all 85,000 new ones. No, I'm just kidding. No, we won't go there.
Yes, and no states will get, all states are.
Speak a little closer to the microphone, I think, just for the
Yes,
people
sir.
online.
Yes, that's reviewed by, in fact, these are very open, transparent programs. Morningstar rates them. We're rated silver. The only, I think, 3 or 4 silver-rated states, only 2 gold in the country. If anyone, will be very much in line with those. Any adjustment the board made, it would not get out of line.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure we don't put the cap up there and then have somebody treated. So we do have an IRS letter or safe harbor. I think that would be wise. I'm sure the board would get it. I would get a safe harbor letter from the IRS before one move the cap. Well, with that, I thank you very much. And I'll get with you, as quickly as we can, and we'll get this moved over. And this is our first look at this. I tried to give this committee, two looks at all the legislation. So we appreciate you doing that. I don't think you had a lot more questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
I just want to finish by saying the purpose of this ABLE is to give young adults the opportunity to move out of the home and see if they can live on their own. because with the $2,000 asset limit, they could never do that. So they become almost wards of the state when their parents pass on. It's a terrible time for them to try to figure out how to live on their own. So in a way, and I've heard this said when we did this, 6 or 7 years ago, one of them said, I'd rather get a paycheck than a benefit check. And it makes them very proud that they can be self-sufficient. So
Yes,
thank
sir.
you all for hearing this.
A lot of them, good move. Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on now. Representative Gamble, you have HB 130, LC 500445-EC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and with your permission, I've asked Georgia Student Finance Commission
Sure.
President Lynn Riley to join me.
President, if you don't mind, I'm going, Dr. Hawkins, Chairman Hawkins, one of the things, just help me remember, you also in the bill refer to the Executive Director of Georgia Student Finance. And I think we now call that person the president, so we need to, I'm seriously, just to correct it before I forget, if we're touching the bill, we would probably need to correct that just for a notation status when Representative Gamble mentioned the president. Madam President, come on and join us. I think she was mentioned as an executive. Representative Gamble.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's good to be with you today, and I bring you House Bill 130 on behalf of the governor, the Georgia Peace Officers Service Loan Repayment Program. And before I get into sharing a little bit about the bill and what it does, I have some figures that I want to share with you from the sheriffs in 3 of the larger cities, counties in our state. Macon-Bibb County is short 110 sheriff deputies. Richmond County is short 140 sheriff deputies, and Chatham County is short 190. And I checked with my sheriff in Bartow County. We're certainly smaller than those areas, but we're short 26 in Bartow County. For state troopers, the targeted number, the ideal number is 1,000 state troopers that we like to maintain, and currently there's only 775. And then for police departments, a survey was conducted last year of 250 police department agencies around the state, and it was determined that there's approximately a 2,894 officer shortage as of that last summer when that was conducted. So you certainly know from talking to your people at home the challenges that we face to recruit and retain men and women in law enforcement. And so that is, in essence, what this bill is trying to encourage and support, basically to recruit and retain public law enforcement officers across our state. It builds upon what was done last year when criminal justice was added to the HOPE career grant list, where you can go get a degree in criminal justice and that be paid for. Law enforcement officers are critical to protecting the citizens of our state, but they're often faced with a decision between heeding the call of public service or seeking other opportunities to pay student loans. And so to ensure that we're recruiting and retaining top talent, we're looking to implement an investment of $3.2 million in a loan repayment plan for state and local law enforcement. So it's just state and local. This plan will fund up to 800 officers and will provide a loan repayment of up to $20,000 per officer in exchange for 5 years of service. And the funding has been included in the amended fiscal year 23 budget and also in the FY 24. Of course, the House voted on the supplemental budget last week. I'll share with you a little bit about the bill and why I asked President Riley to join me this afternoon. It will be administered by the Georgia Student Finance Commission. Eligibility requirements will be based on the fact that they must be employed as a full-time post-certified public, state, or local officer on or after January 1 of this year by a public, state, or local law enforcement agency or department. Once a year of service is tracked and verified, the loan repayment process begins on or after January 1, 2024, depending on employment date and program enrollment date. For the next years leading to an officer's 5-year limit, priority will be given to those who were previously enrolled in the program the year before until all 800 public officer positions are filled. Of course, it's going to all be verified by Georgia Student Finance Commission. So that, in essence, is what the bill does. And so I've asked President Riley to also share a little bit from her perspective on their agency's involvement with this, because it will be such an integral part of implementing this and making sure that the fidelity and the guardrails are on the program. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you, Floor Leader Gamble. I think you've covered most everything. Operationally, Georgia Student Finance Authority would enter into a loan repayment agreement with the eligible peace officer, and they would make application to us and justify to us that they have outstanding student debt. And then, based on our corroboration of that, we would execute a agreement with the peace officer to pay up to $4,000 of the existing debt that they are holding per year for each year of service that they provide in Georgia, and they must also remain a legal resident of Georgia in performing this service. And I will assist Floor Leader Gamble in any way I can in answering questions.
You have a couple. Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of questions. I'll try to make them quick. First, in the state of Georgia, do you have to have a degree to go into law enforcement at all?
Thank you for that question. In this particular program, no, that would not be necessary. If a full-time peace officer is employed and studying toward a degree, that person would be eligible.
Okay. Follow up to that is, would that be for any major, or are you specifically looking for criminal justice majors?
For any major, and that's one of the distinctions between what was done last year and what this loan service repayment offers.
All right, and one final question, Mr. Chair. When you say that you're going to enter into an agreement with the law enforcement individual, are you giving them money to pay off their loan, or are you entering into an agreement with the student loan servicer?
We will enter into an agreement with the actual peace officer, but payments will be made against the loans that are outstanding. The dollars will go directly to the holder of the note.
Thank you.
Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for bringing this legislation. I just have a couple questions. There is already a federal program that pays police officers, is there not?
I'm not familiar with the federal program that you're speaking of.
Okay, and I mean, I'm talking about the federal loan program, that if the police officer goes, I know they have it for teachers. I thought they had it for police officers also.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, and the other question is, which loans will you pay back? Just loans from in Georgia or direct loan?
Certified student debt.
Okay.
It could not be a line of credit. It couldn't be anything other that is verifiable student debt for higher education purposes.
Okay, and this is my final question, and it goes with the other representative. You said that you're going to pay back loans for any classes that they took. So if I'm a freshman, I go and I don't really like going to college, so I stop. And then I decide I'm going to be a police officer, and then I have these loans. So you're going to pay those off for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we would. The incentive is to have the peace officer perform that service of protecting citizens in the state of Georgia. And for each year in which they protect the citizens of Georgia, the state would be offering them a repayment on a loan that they incurred to advance their education.
Okay, thank you. My father was a police officer, but I also think maybe if we pay them more, that might make a better difference. But thank you.
Chairman Perkle.
I'll wait for a moment, please.
Yes, sir. We'll come back to you. Just press your button again. Chairman Carpenter.
I was looking for the vegetable dessert analogy again there, Chairman Perkle. Question, taxable, not taxable? Is the money?
That was coming. Go ahead. I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah,
Carry on.
is the funds taxable, not taxable?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Carpenter. In order to avoid any potential taxation in Georgia, the General Assembly could add language that would specifically exempt it from taxation. I could not speak to federal taxability, but certain other programs that the state administers have included language that would specifically exempt it from taxation by the state of Georgia.
Okay, and then one more follow-up, Chair.
Yes.
Is there concern, this applies to new hires, is there concern that you get a little bit of internal morale issue with existing police officers, peace officers, if you will? I know we see a little bit of that in the teacher stuff that we're doing, right? You've got the people that have been there 20 years and they get the same bump, but it's from a percentage basis, it's not the same as the new guy walking in off the street. So is there any concern from the industry at all of morale issues?
So, Mr. Chairman, we're also joined today by the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police, Butch Ayers, and the Georgia Sheriff's Association. Terry Norris, I think, was on his way. I'm not sure if he's here yet or not. I would defer to them to speak to that. I certainly understand your question, and that is a fair question. But if you're okay with it, I would like Mr. Ayers to speak to any thoughts that he might have regarding that.
We'll go with yes. Rep, you have anything further? All right. Representative Glaze.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One is those peace officers that we are recruiting and want to retain, the loans that we will pay are only the loans that they have accrued up to the date of recruitment. Is that correct? Or will that be allowed to continue in a program of study, and then we pay that too? I just want to be clear.
Thank you for that question. The construct of the bill would allow for peace officers to continue their education, and subject to the amounts of appropriations available and the subscription up to 800 officers, yes, they could reapply subject to appropriations if they incur additional debt.
And so the maximum could be beyond 20,000.
No.
Okay.
And I'll stand corrected on that. Maximum per any recipient would be 20,000, but that would not be limited to debt when they initially enter into an agreement. If they encounter additional debt or take on additional debt subsequent to a first agreement with Student Finance Authority, it could be contemplated based on availability of funds and slots.
Okay, one last question.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And so what happens if we get a recruit and they sign on and they're actually, say maybe in their first year, are we paying the $4,000 each month so that if they leave the service, then we stop paying the next month? Or how is that done?
The expectation would be that the member of the police force, a peace officer, fulfills an entire year's worth of service before a payment is made on any student debt.
That is excellent. So we're always in front of their service. Okay.
That is correct. It's service, then repayment.
Thank you so kindly.
To the author of the bill and Madam President, isn't this a bit like if you worked at a company that people have tuition reimbursement when you're working there, except this is, you would if you had a loan to do it. Now the question I have, and I have 4 more lights here to do that, is what if one of our officers is paying as they go? So what if we have somebody that comes to work at Macon-Bibb County, meets the criteria, and they're paying for school out of their pocket? I don't see a provision in this bill that they get reimbursed. Is there anybody besides me that find a bit of pause with that. So what if but we're basically encouraging them to go, they have to go get a loan. Maybe, I don't know if they incur any cost in doing that or not, but it would seem as though, so is that something we can work on at a later time, or you can answer that would be handled now?
So it's just applicable to loans.
Okay.
And so a scenario like that would not be covered by this program.
Okay, I'll leave it to the will of the committee with a head nod here in a minute, but I personally think we should treat people that, if they want to go and better themselves and they're being a police officer, I don't think they should be behind those that would go get a loan to do it, and then we'd repay their loan next year. Now, I'm not saying we pay them as we go. They go up to $4,000 a year out of their pocket. Then they've essentially loaned themselves. Maybe they need to get a promissory note with their spouse or father-in-law or something to do it. But I think we do, in serious business, we should think about not leaving those individuals out. But I'll yield to the will of the committee. We got to move along here, because the longer we talk, we're getting more lights up here. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the floor leader, thank you for bringing this piece of legislation. I certainly commend you and the governor for what they're trying to do to help us recruit law enforcement officers in our state. I know I've spoken to several friends that are in law enforcement. I've spoken to my chiefs. I've spoken to my sheriffs, and I know it is a hard time to recruit law enforcement officers and to be in that field. I guess, just functionally, how do we decide who the 800 are going to be? What if it's so wildly successful we get twice that amount, and we hope it is, right? How do we decide who's in line when?
So it would require to change the bill. Right now, it's on a first come, first served basis that the Student Finance Commission will be overseeing, but that would be the prerogative of the legislature if they wanted to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
1, 2. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in the corner. Similar to Representative Kelly, a question that I have is, while I am absolutely, let's see what we could do to get more police officers, and we desperately need them. So one of the things that we look at when we're looking at say at work, as the chairman had just mentioned, with tuition reimbursement. So I'm working at this, I'm going to school, my company helps pay me back for what, for the work, but presumably it's because it's going to make you better at your job. It concerns me somewhat that there appears to be no guardrails on what you can have school debt for, and while I think we need well-rounded police officers, I don't know that art history or a theater major would be make a better police officer than criminal justice or something. So I do have some concern with that, and you might could address that. And secondly, when I was going, when my kids were going through school, I can't remember when I went through, but when my kids were going through, we felt like this FAFSA thing, and when we're going up, okay, how much can you take care of, and how much is it going to cost, and how much are you going to have to borrow? Would this be an unintended consequence of, if I know I'm going to be a police officer and I'm just going to get a little extra, I will get 4 incidentals in the meal plan or whatever, that it would incent me to borrow more in order to do my schooling? Those are the 2 questions, if they're fairly related, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, thank you for that question. We certainly would hope that we would be able at Student Finance Commission to assist anyone in that circumstance to speak with us about all of the other scholarship and loan programs that we might have available to them. For example, the Georgia Completion Grant and some other ways that students could fund their education without having to go into debt. But for those that become peace officers or are peace officers and have existing debt, this language would allow the state to assist them in, paying off that debt by serving the citizens of the state.
Representative Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question to you all is if a peace officer is hurt or God forbid is passes away in the line of duty, do the repayments continue to the family or?
Thank you for that question, Representative. Because this is a loan repayment program for service, it would not contemplate that. However, we do have a public safety memorial grant and some other assistance that can be provided to any of our public safety officials that are injured in service.
Okay, so if you were already repaying their loan and something happens, then you will cease payment on their loan?
In this construct, yes.
All right, and Mr. Chair, may I ask one more question? Thank you. If it is on a first come, first served basis, how will you assure that there's equity within the awards?
We would certainly look for all of the criteria that is listed in the bill to be met, and first come, first serve is exactly what it says. We would consider an application as it is received by the authority in the order that they're received.
Lack of a better term, did you time date stamp them and came in, and when you found 800 qualifying applicants,
Mr. Chairman.
801, okay. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions just to make sure that I understand it. Line 16, course study means an undergraduate degree program. So this would not be applicable for those that are just taking a single course or dabbling, but they have to be enrolled in a degree-seeking program, correct?
That's correct.
And this could also be anywhere. We're not limiting it to a USG institution. It could be anywhere in the country, online or otherwise.
That's right.
Correct. And you could even have already done the work, but then just have the outstanding loan balance, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So with the with those that already have existing debt, I think one interesting scenario would be maybe somebody that went to a very interesting or a very expensive school and then dropped out after 1 year and wasn't a degree seeking program at the time, left, has significant debt that's greater than $20,000 for a single year, but is not continuing on the program because they left. They're now a full-time worker, but it seems to me they would still be eligible to have loan forgiveness for that 1 year as long as they worked for 5 years. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I think both of us would ask for a bit of clarification, if we could, Representative.
Sure. So I'm an officer and I go to an expensive school and I have debt. Say it's $30,000. I drop out after year one. It's not for me. I then go into law enforcement in Georgia, but I have this debt. I'm paying it down, paying my monthly payments. As I read the bill, is that I would be eligible for repayment up to $20,000.
Correct. You would be eligible for that, but not anything above the $20,000.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so is it fair to say that after year one, say I was selected out of the 800, after year one, I'd get payment for $4,000 to be made?
Yes.
Year two, $8,000, et cetera.
Right. To keep you in law enforcement.
Okay. So my one concern there, and I recognize that scenario may not be incredibly prevalent, but it's not super rare either that individuals go to school, take out debt, and then leave, and then we don't get the benefit of them finishing a degree program. I don't know how you can fix that in terms of policy, but I just raised that in terms of an issue because I think what we're trying to achieve is to get them to the end state of having a bachelor's to improve their education so they're better speakers, better writers, and can do all the things that they need to do as law enforcement officers. So I raised that as a question, and just if there's any way to tie it to actually finishing a program, and it may not be possible, but
And again, it's on a year-by-year basis. So in that scenario, the most that they could get out of you if they came and served 1 year is just the $4,000 and not the full, $20,000 that they're eligible for if they stayed for 5 years.
So under my scenario, they would only get one payment of.
Well, it's retroactive based on the year of of service.
Yeah, let me see, just in the interest of time, let me see if I can do this. For every year that you would be eligible under the bill, whatever that time frame is, you get $4,000. The fact that you had gotten in debt before you came,
Yes.
if you work 4 years, you get $16,000. Whatever a year is, and I mean, you kind of look, when you came, you got to be here a year before January 1st. That's whatever that year is. For every year here, you get 4,000 up to 20,000, regardless of if you achieve the degree, regardless of where you spent the money, as long as it is legitimate higher education debt. So I mean, I take your point. If you're trying to get someone, you know, this would be the same if somebody studied something that would help them, if you will, in law enforcement, as opposed to something that maybe wouldn't be so helpful.
Right.
Unless you just assume any higher education program would help you to some degree, you know, communicate with people and do things. But you raise an interesting point on that.
And my other question is substantive. It's lines 46 through 48. It states, "The authority shall have the power to terminate a student loan repayment agreement at any time for any cause deemed sufficient by the authority, provided that such power shall not be arbitrarily or unreasonably exercised." I recognize that that's broad to give flexibility, but can you give us some examples of what that might look like?
Thank you for that question. I think you've just illustrated that if a peace officer chose to no longer serve in that role, that would terminate the contract. I can only think of that as being a reason, because there is no obligation for any interactions during the 12 months of each year.
Again, I'm interjecting, but in talking with the folks before from the governor's office, I think that contemplates this being like the old days of the NCAA, when you signed a 4-year a 4-year scholarship. Now they're 4 1-year scholarships.
Yes.
I think this contemplates that you presume you're going to do this for 5 years up to 20,000. If you cease being a peace officer in those 4 years, this is the paragraph that would allow them to terminate you. Otherwise, you would have you would have a rotating contract. But again, Representative, you raised good points that we need to clarify and make sure that they need the broad authority to do it. But we want to make sure that there's some predictability for the officers involved as well.
Right.
I think that's where you were going.
It is, and I think that I understand it, which is from the date of acceptance into the program, and then the clock starts, and then after 1 year, then that's when they get some level of repayment. And then if they stay year 2, year 3, year 4, et cetera. Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Representative Burnell.
Chairman, I just have one other suggestion as a retired educator. I do think that there should be some grade point average, like they should have at least had a C grade point average before you just pay back money to someone that failed all their courses. That's just my suggestion.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I know, again, I go back to the numbers that we referenced earlier where the shortage is at, and I think that, this won't completely solve the problem. It takes a bite at the apple of trying to do something, but certainly that's a fair.
Well, the reason I say that is because one thing about education, if a person graduates from high school, that meant that they made that commitment. They went all the way through. If a person goes to college, they may or may not, college might not be for them. But you have to also look at the commitment, because while we need more educators and we need more police officers, we don't need just anybody. We need somebody that's going to be competent, somebody that can process, somebody that has those writing skills and all those things. So we don't want to take away the fact that you do have to go to school, and there are advantages to doing that, and that's what helps you go further along within your career or some kind of training. But to just say no, because that's just like saying you don't really have to go to school to be an educator, but you really do. It's a difficult job being a police officer, and there are lots of skills that they have to have. So it's not just about getting them, but it's also about maintaining them, and then they become They can become quality police officers.
Thank you, Representative Jackson, number 10 there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just thinking, if a person is a police officer and they have been in college, but they decided that they were not ready during that time, and this program comes along, they may have a loan out there when they dropped out that they may be in, have not paid and what have you. How does that affect all of this? Because you're getting a person with a loan that dropped out of school that has become a police officer and now they want to go back to school. I know you can't apply this money to the old loan. So how does that other loan just hang out there? Or is there anything that is stipulated that if you have an outstanding loan from, one of the other services, and has he or she been paying it back? Or would that be considered when the person is trying to get into, this is an excellent program, but I'm thinking about that one that at a very early age has started and they were not there, but they took out loans in order to go to school.
Well, thank you, Representative Jackson, for that question. In that scenario, if that peace officer came and applied for this program, they would be eligible as long as they started their service on or after January 1, 2023.
Okay, but I think what I'm asking is, before that time period, they may have been enrolled in one of the institutions and they may have taken out the student loan, but in that interim period, they were not paying back the money that they borrowed at the beginning. Is that considered, or does that just sit to the side? And of course, they can get, a deferment and all of that with it. But do we get that information, or will we get that information in order for that student not to have two loans sitting out here? This one is not being paid, and we have entered in something where they can get $4,000 a year. Does that make sense?
Thank you, and yes, it does. We certainly would want anyone that would want to take advantage of this loan program to talk with us, and we would want to ask them and confirm that if they have qualified student debt outstanding, principal balance, and they meet every other eligibility criteria, yes, they would be eligible to have payments on those loans.
Thank you.
We have one more question, and we need to move on to the next bill. We're just hearing this one today. Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is very technical. If I am a police officer and I work in one agency and I decide to go into this, if I leave that agency, let's say I live in DeKalb and I want to work for DeKalb PD, and then I leave there and I go and work for somewhere else, does that count as a disruption in my service? Like maybe it takes me a minute to get rehired, like I moved to another county and it took me 2 months before I got hired by this new, and to follow up with that, because I know we're running short on time. In that scenario, this person is applying because they wanted to move. What if I'm fired, but I know that there are other police agencies that are looking for people, and I go on and I get hired somewhere else, and maybe I'm being fired because I'm not a good police officer, and my loans are still getting paid off, but I'm basically hopping from agency to agency. Is there any guardrails on that? Number one, is there any guardrails on just switching agencies or switching locations? And two, anything in place to stop our bad apples from kind of moving around just to get their loans paid off?
Not today, not as of right now with the legislation that we have with us. Would that scenario be addressed? But
I'm going to respectfully disagree with the gentleman, take the chairman's prerogative to do so. I think that's another thing that lines 46 and 47 do when it says the authority shall have the power to terminate a student loan at any time for any cause deemed sufficient. I believe, again, I don't go opposite to the author of the bill, but I believe that would give the authority given, just what I know the Student Finance Authority, the way they operate, they would go through a due process situation, but it would give them, I believe, the authority to stop that. But I know, and I've spoken to Representative Hawkman. I know he's a learned attorney. I think he can work with us along with you, Dr. Clark, to allay those concerns, because I too have the same thing. If somebody's displaced because of a cut down, you don't want them to, if they have a break in service for 2 weeks, to go into another department and everything's good. You don't want this to bother them. Yet if somebody's terminated for cause, to me, being terminated for cause within an agency after an agency's due process province would probably give you, in the Student Finance Commission, the ability to terminate the agreement. And I think you can probably set that through, you can talk about your rules and regulations
Right.
process.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to elaborate a bit. In the statute, it speaks to remaining employed as a peace officer for an entire year. The authority promulgates rules and regulations that can consider exceptions, and those could be outlined in the agreement that is entered into with any applicant. The commission, the Georgia Student Finance Authority, who would actually oversee this program, has the ability today to receive exception requests for our programs, and this would follow that same structure. Exceptions could be contemplated by the commission for situations that either are contemplated in an agreement or that may become apparent to us as the program evolves.
But pardon me for interrupting to Governor's floor. You're right. Statutorily, there's nothing that prevents that, but I think that was written such by Executive Council to allow an executive branch agency to have the authority they need to properly administer the program. We don't have any more questions at this time, so I'm going to wrap this up and I think we have a few things that we want to talk about and work on. That's why we sound them out before the committee, one time before we get to them. But I'd give you a minute or two that if you want to close with the thoughts from the.
Well, I want to first of all,
on behalf of the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for this robust conversation today. And definitely we want to be a part of working to make sure that you're comfortable with this legislation. I will add, and I know we're short on time, but Mr. Ayers came today, and I just wanted to see if he could speak briefly to the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police and their thoughts on this legislation.
Absolutely.
As well.
Mr. Ayers. Yes, sir. They look comfortable sitting there, Mr. Ayers. I'm going to ask you to stand up. How about that? President Riley's getting around with a walking boot, so we're going to let her stay seated and give you the microphone over there. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the committee today. My name is Butch Ayers. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. Our association is supporting or in support of House Bill 130. And one of the things that we're facing here in the state of Georgia is we have an acute workforce crisis as far as retention and recruiting. We have some agencies across this state that when you look at their authorized manpower level, you have small agencies that might only have 30% of what they're authorized. You have some significantly large agencies that their staffing levels are between 60 and 70%. So I think it's incumbent that we try to do things, think outside of the box on different ways that we can recruit and retain police officers. I believe one of the questions concerned the possibility that this might have some type of pay compression or deal with some people that were employed before the new people came on board. And I think with the way we see this is that there are departments across the state that currently have a tuition reimbursement program in place. And so they see this as completely separate from initial salary. You know, this is something where the employee is stepping forward, wanting to do something else, become educated, and we think it's very important that officers be educated. This is a working job where they have to have a working knowledge to be able to decide and make decisions. Law enforcement officers in the state of Georgia have a lot of power. And basically, is we need to recruit and retain the best officers possible. And it's been said that the police officers have the greatest power legally vested in our frame of government. Only law enforcement officers have been granted the authority to make summary judgments regarding an individual's life, property, or liberty. No one else in our society has that, and therefore we need to do the best that we can and have the most educated, well-rounded officers to be able to serve our communities. I'd be glad to answer any questions for this.
Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers, for being here today, and thank you for that explanation. Just really quickly, you brought up tuition reimbursement, and I'm curious, the agencies that have tuition reimbursement, are those the ones where we see fewer shortages, or is there any correlation between reimbursing tuition and actually getting people to apply to and become and stay a police officer?
I don't have the figures specifically on a correlation there, but I do know that there are shortages in law enforcement agencies from places that do have tuition reimbursement. There are shortages from agencies that have competitive salaries as well.
Thank you.
I see no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is a workforce bill to incentivize people going to be an officer. And so the Georgia Student Finance Commission has within this bill the ability to weed out any bad actors. And so I just want to reaffirm you on your question, Dr. Clark, because that is a fair question. So, but thank you again for the opportunity to present the bill today.
Thank you, and I'll get with you and maybe hook you up with a couple of members of the committee to see if there are things that we want to do to improve the proposition and make it more more useful, even more useful. And so that the one thing I would ask you to do, and you get with Legislative Council, is at least get with Legislative Council to address the taxability of it. I know there was a recent ruling, and in fact, President Riley mentioned to me about some of the rulings of some of the state credits that have been given during the pandemic as to the IRS's ruling on them being taxable at the federal level, and if so, that most people are coupled, so it comes to the tax. So if we're trying to do this without it being state taxable, I mean, $20,000 at the 5% rate is $1,000. I mean, it makes a difference. So we'd want to do that if we're trying to deliver that without a tax implication. But we'll do that, and we'll get with you. Thank you. It's
so
a good
much.
proposition. We look forward to having you back. We're going to go right on with another governor's floor leader in here today. We have Representative McDonald from the 26th. He's going to bring us House Bill 163 LC 3392 53-EC, and we're a bit on the clock. Representative McDonald, you're going to take the chair.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Would you mind if I brought up the chief pathologist from the state?
No, sir, that's
Dr.
fine.
Smith for his
Yeah,
knowledge
that'll be
and-
fine.
And director register for my protection.
Both of those things are,
While
so ordered.
Director register's coming up, he since the session last time, he's now the director of the GBI, replaced Vic Reynolds, who went on to be a judge, and just like to welcome him to, I guess, one of
Yes,
the
sir.
first hearings, isn't it? Yes, sir. Right.
And let me just set the stage. I know there's some in this bill that's a little bit similar to the last bill, and by that I mean it's a little bit different. But there is some similarities. If I could lay the groundwork for the governor's floor leader here, this is a loan repayment program, as well, but it's for somebody that already has their credentials and so forth. So we'll try to listen to you and put our questions around the differences in the two bills, knowing that you're probably going to have I think we're going to have the same question about taxability,
Sure.
With these benefits as well. So we'll not air those for you again. If we can fix them in one place, we'll fix them in both. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. This is HB 163, as the chairman mentioned. This is a bill that is crucial to our state, crucial to our families of our state. We're me personally, in my previous life, I was a coroner for 16 years, and over those 16 years, I've had to work a lot with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the pathology department there, and they've always been super to work with and efficient. But as Georgia has grown, our pathologists have not grown. Currently we have 19 spots available in the state of Georgia for pathologists, and we only have nine pathologists for 11 million people. And in my personal business, this is something I deal with every day. And I'm sure a lot of y'all have gotten the calls from somebody not getting a loved one back that's taken a week and a half. And it's not only affecting the family, it's also affecting investigations in our different communities. So this is a bill that's a loan repayment bill that will help us recruit and retain. And I think I want y'all to hear that. Recruit and retain good pathologists. And this isn't just an issue that's in the state of Georgia. This is a nationwide issue. And we feel the governor is stepped up to the plate, and he's put money in his budget for the FY 23 and 24 budget to cover these loan repayments. And with this, I look around the state, and the 9 that we have full-time, they're at the headquarters in Atlanta. So you think about, we've got sub-headquarters, we've got a place in Pooler, which is a coastal region examiner, medical examiner, coastal lab, and we also have one in Macon. But they use part-time medical examiners. So not always can that person go to have the autopsy done at those locations. And then they have to bring them up to the GBI headquarters. So you think about coming from Savannah, but even worse than Savannah, you get down in St. Mary's, Georgia, or Thomasville. That delay that's already there because of the shortage of pathologists, but the delay of the travel time. And so it's important that we fill these. I think the need is for 14 full-time at headquarters, 2 full-time in Macon, and 3 in Pooler. It's that busy in our state. I'm in the interest of time, and then I'm going to ask does anybody on the committee think we don't have a shortage and a need for this? I mean, I'm just going to help you make your case. I think we the need, and again, because your colleague there, you can deal with Representative Gamble when y'all get back to the leader's office. I'm seriously, I don't mean to cut you off. We have an absolute need. You had a bill similar to this last year, and so we want to work with you on it. Tell us about the nuts and bolts with the director, and if we'll cut to that, and we'll give you some more. We'll give you some more time, but I just don't think anybody believes we don't have the need. So you got a winner there. Just tell us how this implements, and let's make sure we got it right. Again, this is one of those bills we ran out of time. We passed it out of the House. It passed 172-1, and then just got it over to the Senate, and that's where it died. As far as the loan repayment, it's $20,000 a year, and it's stair-stepped. Thank you. It's stair-stepped where the first year it pays 10% in year 1, 15% in year 2, 20% in year 3, 25% in year 4, and 30% in year 5. So that's where we're getting the retention incentive is to stay here because of that growth of percentage and the max you can have is $100,000 loan repayment. So it's that's the basis of the bill. Be glad to answer any questions. Yeah, and to be clear, it's 100% over 5 years. It's not 20% a year. It's repaid at 10, 15, Correct. 20. That's so the schedule. The longer you're with us, the more it's back end loaded basically to do that. So you got. See, I knew we were going to get there. You got several lights up here. So we're gonna. Will you take some questions here?
I'd love to.
So we don't run you out of time. Dr. Clark. Dr. Clark, you've about used up all your time. No, I'm just kidding. Dr. Clark, you go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to do my job.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have a couple questions. The first question is the type of degree that we're talking about that people are pursuing. And the follow-up question to that is how much are the current state pathologists paid, like just their regular salary? And then I might have a follow-up based on the answers to those.
I'm going to let
Hi there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I'm the Chief Medical Examiner for the state of Georgia. Will have been the chief for about a year. I practiced my entire career in the state of Georgia, which is getting on to 30 years now, and had a previous stint with the State Medical Examiner's Office. Forensic pathologists, we are a very small part of the medical pie. We're physicians, licensed physicians in the state of Georgia. We have specialty training in clinical and anatomic pathology, which is 4 years after medical school. Yep. And then we also require 1 year of specialty training in forensic pathology. So we're looking at an individual that has a medical degree, is required to be board certified in at least anatomic and clinical pathology, and then forensic pathology in order to practice as a medical examiner in the state of Georgia. As far as the salaries are concerned, the legislature has very generously in the past increased the medical examiners' salaries to be very competitive nationwide. And I think the starting salary for an associate medical examiner is $260,000, I believe. It might have been $265 now with the stipend from $5,000 stipend from last year. So as an associate medical examiner coming straight out of training, your fellowship training, you're being paid $265,000. Once you pass your boards, it goes up another $10,000. That's the board certification in forensic pathology. And then it goes up incrementally after that for years served. I think, I can't give you the figures exactly, but it goes up after 10 years service, 20 years service, etc.
Awesome. So just under 300,000, and would you say that's competitive with, you said it is competitive, but if I'm not working as a state medical examiner and I go out and work for like some private company, how much more am I making?
Oh, the sky's the limit there. We have a lot of attorneys around that like medical examiners. So, yeah, we have never, as medical examiners, forensic pathologists, been competitive with private enterprise, and certainly we, you know, we're, like I say, I have no complaints about the salary that the state pays me, for example. I enjoy my work, but as far as other medical fields, in particular pathology, most pathologists work in a hospital setting with other clinicians. So part of the deterrent, I guess, in the past at least, for people wanting to do forensic pathology has been salaries, getting competitive salaries. The other thing is, you know, the medical schools have disgraced themselves somewhat by not introducing pathology and forensic pathology as part of the curriculum early on. So we're not getting individuals in the medical schools knowing anything about this field. I had a senior medical student from Emory University look me in the eye and when he said, well, what about forensic pathology as a career? He said, well, physicians don't do that work. And that's somebody from Emory University. Yep. So, you know, we have a number of problems in terms of image and accessibility as far as that's concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have two statements, really. I just want to recognize Chief Register. He was the chief in Clayton County, so welcome now with your new position. And when you were just talking about, you know, the interest and all those shows that come on, like NCIS is one of my favorite shows. So have you, do you all go and talk to the students in high schools and elementary schools, middle schools about the profession? Because, you know, I think you could find some students that would eventually go into that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, as part of revamping the training program, one of my associate medical examiners, Dr. Rachel Geller, and another associate, Dr. Natasha Grandi, have together collectively revamped the entire training program, which is going to include going to high schools and outreach situations to talk about forensic pathology. The problem we have is that it's a long way down the line for individuals at the age of 18 or 16 or 15 at high school to think ahead to undergraduate, graduate training, and then forensic pathology. There's a lot of distractions along the way.
Thank you.
Representative Hawkins, Scott Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious as to whether or not, if this were to be implemented, and certainly we've heard about this issue for a number of years, do you think that this helps retain people for the 5 years and then they leave? and go to the private sector. So is it really a 5-year extension that we're getting, or do you think that there's a possibility of people staying longer term?
I think there's a possibility for people staying. I have people, 3 doctors on my staff at the moment, one of whom's been with the agency for 23 years, another 20 years, one coming up to 15 years, and another that's, I think, approaching nine years. I see this as an experiment to some degree, where the state of Georgia distinguishes itself from the other jobs that are being offered there. If you go to the National Association of Medical Examiners website, there's anywhere from 50 to 60 jobs being posted all over the country at any time. If you look at the range of salaries, they're generally all fairly competitive. What I see this doing is distinguishing us from the pack, because very few of the offices actually have a program where there is loan reimbursement for the forensic pathologist working in that particular office or agency.
Can you give us a sense of the average loan debt that most pathologists have after they complete their studies?
I wouldn't like to, of the doctors that I know, it's anywhere from $150,000 to $400,000, depending on, sort of where they went to medical school and how much debt they accrued.
Okay. And I guess my last question is kind of interrelated on this theme, which is, based on what you just testified, is that there are a number of people who have clearly decided to make this their career. So is the issue more of recruitment, meaning getting people to come in the door in the first place, or do you have an issue of retention of people leaving after 2, 3, 4 years now?
At the moment, it's recruitment. Just to give you an idea, there are, I think, 40 accredited training spots for forensic pathologists across the country, and that's a ballpark figure. My associates tell me that last year there were 51 graduates from those programs, and I think maybe 35 to 40 of those people will plan to become full-time forensic pathologists. And of those people, a large number of them stay at the place where they train. So we're looking at a very small number of individuals coming out of certified, training programs, where essentially you can scroll down the job page on the medical examiner's site and pretty much pick where you would like to live and how much you would like to earn. So we're essentially competing for a very small number of people coming out of programs, and the way we've started to address it now is essentially by revamping our training program at the headquarters, with 2 current fellows who are with another person coming from New Mexico. They're potential employees. We have the training program again. 12 individuals have applied for training for starting the year 2024. Again, potentially more doctors for our system, but what we're looking to do is to incentivize it so that we're not competing with our other offices where they may want to go after training. But right. I think once people, my opinion, having worked for the state previously and worked within the state, people generally stay for long term.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is sort of personal to me. And first, I want to thank the GBI for really working with my family. My grandnephew was shot to death in Savannah, and it took almost 2 weeks before we could have an autopsy. They had to bring the body all the way to Macon, Georgia, from Savannah. That's why I yelled out Savannah. But your office was very kind, and I wish I could remember the young lady that assisted us, with my nephew. This program is needed in any way possible. I had another individual that told me they had 3 people in a car accident, and they couldn't get the autopsies in a timely manner. Mr. Chairman, I do feel that there is a tremendous need here in the state of Georgia to get more, and if it means helping doctors going to this area, it is definitely needed. I don't know, anything about cost and all of that, but I would love to see pathologists working closer proximity of areas so they would not have to go, or the bodies would not have to be moved all the way from Savannah to Macon. You have a facility in Poola, and it was not available at that time. I guess we can't make a decision of where we want to go, but I was trying to find a bill to help get these doctors an offer to help them pay off their loans, because they're definitely needed in the state of Georgia at this time. Didn't have a question.
Yes, ma'am. I was about to remind you of that. So, I love you dearly, and you're a great colleague and a great part of this committee, Representative Jackson. But yes, ma'am. All right, I'm going to go out of order here because Dr. Clark's already had her bite at the apple, and go to Representative Glaze. Then we'll come back to you, Dr. Clark. We're going to give your seatmate there a bite at the apple, and we'll come to you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always excited about workforce and education and how that collaborates and where there's intersection. My question is there opportunity, and this is maybe to our chair as well, in the last 2 bills, in line 47 and line 53 of each says any time for any cause. Is there opportunity to go and make sure that we put some real teeth in that, so that there are real reasons why we would terminate a repayment agreement? One is, of course, if someone was, there was malfeasance or something inside of the workplace and they were fired. Can we put a little bit into that so that we know that along these lines are where we would have concern and someone would lose their repayment status for those 2 bills? And that might be to the committee, but certainly that is to you guys as well.
Yeah, let me just, in the interest of time, to the leader, we'll take. I mean, I hear your interest in that, and we'll try to get everybody on the same page and at ease, so that we put ourselves in a good position to be careful enough. One has to be careful. If you put too much in statute, you hamstring the process, and you'll invariably throw somebody out of a program you didn't really mean to. I also hear the lady's question. If you don't put enough in the statute and you don't have good rulemaking, you have somebody stay in the program you don't want to. And I think we have, and we'll invite. Well, I guess President Rice, that's a question I'm going to go. That's the next question I'm going to go, and I'll come to Dr. Clark. I was going to say we'll ask President Riley about the rules, but the way this is written, it looks like it's going to be administered by the Board of Healthcare Workforce. Is that what you mean to do? You're going to put them in the loan repayment business?
Well, we've got Chad Mason here representing the Georgia Healthcare Workforce, and that's what it currently is. If you need to speak. Speak. Well, let me go to Dr. Clark, and then I'm going to I'll ask him to do that. Let me check with her. Dr. Clark.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I'm taking up a lot of time. Question, we've talked a lot about recruitment, and the doctor brought up a good point in that here in the state of Georgia, it doesn't seem like we even have the training programs. And so it's not necessarily this bill, or if we do have the training programs, apparently doctors don't know that they can do that as a doctor. This bill does not require you to have completed your work in the state of Georgia, right? Is that the way I read it? You can get your loans can come from any state, any school, any state. Is there, maybe not for this bill, but in order to train people in Georgia and keep them in Georgia, is there any incentive Yes, to have Georgia doctors stay in Georgia and do the work in Georgia?
That's a very timely question. As of last couple of weeks ago, actually a week ago, our doctors and some of our staff met with the Dean of Mercer Medical School, and we have a plan which currently and future, which will try and ensure that forensic pathology is seen as primary care in Georgia. And Mercer is very enthusiastic about fast tracking. And when I say fast tracking, I don't mean sort of cutting corners or anything like that, but finding individuals who are interested in pathology and specifically forensic pathology, and will offer scholarships for those individuals. And they can say, we want to do forensic pathology, and we say, that's great, you can do this fast track course, you can go and do a pathology residency, and we're working with universities here, institutions here in Georgia and also nearby South Carolina and Alabama, so they will accept these individuals for a residency program, but they come back to Georgia to do the forensic pathology.
Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any further questions, so I'm going to invite the gentleman from the healthcare workforce up if I can, and ask you the question. How suited are you to administer the repayment process? And I'm going to ask you a loaded question. It makes sense that you would help select the applicants, or you would select the applicants. I think would agree with that. Should we try to bifurcate that responsibility? And here, as I'm writing checks, President Riley and Student Finance has to cash. But is that something you're comfortable with the organization getting in the repayment business?
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. Chet Basine, the Executive Director for the Healthcare Workforce Board. To answer your question, we already administer a parallel program for physicians. Okay. Physicians that serve in communities that are in populations of 50,000 or less. Okay. So we have the infrastructure to administer this. In this situation, GBI would be making the hire and then informing us the physician that would require the loan repayment, and then we would enact our current workflow for that individual.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to make sure we weren't drafting you into into a sport you weren't ready to go. So
appreciate it.
There you go. Did you have anything further you wanted to? Anything further you wanted to share? I think we all stipulate that there's a need, and you can handle the process. So
the only thing I will share is Dr. Clark made an excellent point about physicians' loans. We actually do an annual survey of all the resident or GME, graduate medical education, also known as medical resident graduates on an annual basis. I actually was just looking at the data when he made the remark. The average physician carries that reports into our survey, and we have hundreds, reports about a $280,000 debt load upon graduation. So that's going from residency into practice. So your numbers were very much in the ballpark. We actually have about 6% of the physicians carrying $400,000 or more. Okay. So if anything, hope that helps.
Thank you. We have no further questions. Let me, if you don't mind, ask if there's anyone that came to speak to the proposition today. We'd take those comments at this time. Again, I think that we have a stipulated need here. We just want to make sure we get the language of the bill. Well, no, absolutely. I think you sit down, you have a winner. We just got to make sure the words on the paper get us where we want to go. So I see no comments. So Mr. Leader, I'm going to let you wrap up for us on that bill, and then if either of you gentlemen have anything in closing, we'll try to make sure we have any of the questions answered about the specific language and get it done.
I want to thank the committee, Mr. Chairman, but I'd like to just pass the mic off to Director Register just to say hello and
yes, sir.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, the committee members, and I really thank you for considering this because it certainly is needed. It helps us, as stated before, recruit and retain. I also publicly want to commend Dr. Smith and his whole staff on how hard they work. When you're looking at about 6,000 exams per year, they are accredited by the National Association of Medical Examiners, and the bylaws, it stipulates that it should be staffed to the point where no medical examiner will do over 250 exams per year. And currently, last year, the medical examiners at the GBI did almost 400 per. And it has impacted our accreditation. It's been downgraded. And so, again, Dr. Smith has proven to be a very innovative individual that has thought outside the box to try to figure out innovative ways to address the backlog that we currently have, and also to recruit. We have done other things like visa sponsorships, and I could just go down the line. But thank you again for allowing us to come in and speak with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And if you have nothing further, we thank you for that. And I'll get with you, and we'll make sure we've got things. I noticed that I guess the board is going to take care of the percentages, but we'll work on the details of that. We'll move on. I'm sorry we're down to 16 minutes. I know we have to give up the room, and so we're going to, without further ado, House Bill 185. Vice Chairman of the Majority Caucus, Representative Houston Gaines, is going to bring us LC 491128.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And have Star and Charlie that are experts on this. I know we're running short on time, so I'll just be real brief and explain it.
No, absolutely.
Give them
Yep.
maybe 2 minutes. And
No,
then we'll take
absolutely.
questions.
No, yes.
So what this legislation does, there's several programs throughout the state that several colleges and universities that have what are called inclusive post-secondary education programs, IPSE programs, which allows students with intellectual disabilities the opportunity to attend college with their peers who may or may not have a disability, participate in the same classes, same clubs, same residences, and what has made me passionate about this issue. When I was a student at UGA, I actually helped bring Destination Dogs, which is a program at the University of Georgia, our IPSE program, to Athens and to our college campus, and something that UGA is really proud of, and we're proud to have it in Athens. And there's, like I said, there's several others throughout the state, but it's an incredible program that give these students with intellectual disabilities the opportunity to go to college. I'll tell you, Destination Dogs, the objective is over their course of study to take them from classwork to employment, and to make sure that these individuals have the opportunity to go out and earn a good paycheck and work alongside their peers. So that's it's a thing that it's a program that we're certainly proud of, and I know other colleges are. Kennesaw has a great program. Georgia Tech has a program. Georgia State. There are several. Clemson was actually I think the first big one throughout the country. Clemson Life is what it's called, and that was established several years ago. But that's the overall program. What this bill does is it allows these students to be eligible for the Hope Scholarship. Currently, they're not eligible for Hope because they have not earned a high school diploma, and so not be eligible for the Hope Scholarship. But this legislation will allow these individuals to be eligible for Hope to help offset some of the costs that they incur. Many of these individuals, whether it's with autism or otherwise, have significant amounts of cost of behavioral therapy, and so this would just be a way to try to make this program a little more affordable for these students. There's 143 of these students statewide, and I know that some of these programs are working to expand, but certainly this is something that I believe these students should be eligible for the Hope Scholarship. I think it's the right thing to do, and something that our state can be very proud of. Star, I don't know if there's anything you want to add briefly, and then be happy to take questions.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm Star Bruner with the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. Who are these inclusive post-secondary programs for specifically? They're for students with intellectual disabilities who have been supported by the IDEA throughout high school with an individualized education plan. So there must be an intellectual component to their disability. So this wouldn't be, IPSE wouldn't be the right fit for a person with autism who doesn't have an intellectual disability coinciding with it. One of the hallmarks that we look for is inclusion. Each program in our state, and many other states have the same standard, each program, each student, their course load must be at least 50% in inclusive classes. So at least half of the time they're in classes with their peers who may or may not have an intellectual disability. And most of our schools in our state are at 75 or even 100%. They do, it's real college. It's not a social program. It's not a day program. They do receive accommodations and modifications. The schools work with each professor for each student for each course. And so, as you can imagine, they need a lot of help. It's costly. It's also employment focused, as Representative Gaines said, and they are also integrated into every aspect of campus life. I know UGA is great about their students being active in Greek life. Georgia Southern's program is as well. And quickly, I'll mention which programs have, which colleges have inclusive post-secondary programs. That's Albany Tech. That's our one technical college in the system. We're looking to expand in that area. Columbus State, East Georgia. Georgia College and State University opened up their program last month. There's also Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Kennesaw State, and UGA. New updated numbers as of this semester, there's 149 students total right now across 9 different programs, and they range in size from Kennesaw has 48 students, and Georgia College, who just opened their program, started out with 3 students. You may be interested to know what sort of employment outcomes our students are getting out of the programs. Okay, so we poll our alumni 90 days after graduation and say, do you have a job right now? Yes or no? And so that's where these numbers are coming from, just 90 days after graduation. So the past 3 years have been pandemic years, yes. So our past 3 years of employment percentage is 54, 48, and 58. So last year, 58% of our IPSE graduates were employed within 90 days of their graduation. And when you compare that to the national employment rate for people with similar disabilities who have not gone through IPSE, that number is 19.2%. And that's the employment rate. That's not the unemployment rate for this population. That's the employment rate. And in our state, that number is 15%. So for people with independent living disabilities who have not gone through IPSE, in our state, 15% of them are employed. And last year, we can say that our graduates were 58% employed at that time. And I have, obviously, I can make it available to you all. Businesses across the state, I have a list of hundreds of them, and it's only a partial list. We have big brands like Coca-Cola, Zoo Atlanta, Georgia Aquarium, who are employing our students both as graduates and as interns. And then we have a lot of small businesses across the state who are also finding value in our students and asking, coming back to schools again and again to ask for interns.
Yeah, a couple of questions.
Sure. And I do want to also thank Chairman Katie Dempsey. She's been a champion on this issue. I know has put some funding in the budget multiple times for IPSE programs. I just wanted to mention that, and I know many members of the House have been really supportive of this issue.
It's a good thing. We've got a couple of questions here, and I want to remind everybody we are against a hard stop a minute or two before 3. Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you. A great program. Touches my heart in a lot of ways. Question is, how long's the class? What's the class schedule? Is it a year program? How long's the program?
Most of our programs are 2-year programs,
Okay.
but some of them are also 4-year. For
Okay.
example, Georgia Tech.
I got you. So you said Tech's a 4-year?
Yes.
Okay. And then is there and Katie may be able to answer this, I'm not sure as well, but is there a cap on how many the school will do, and how does the funding work from the state as far as FTE funding?
So our schools are limited by the capacity for funds. They're usually not funded by their larger universities. They're meant to be set up to eventually be self-sustaining, but right now we're supported by the HR subcommittee with $500,000 per year. We have a complex formula that we divide that up between the schools, and it's based on factors like anticipated student size for the coming year, number of certificates available, how long the program is, how diverse your program might be is a new factor that we're thinking about adding in, but it's a complex, yeah.
Thank you. So obviously, these students take on a lot of expenses. What are you seeing as far as some of these people, have they started the program and had to drop out because of that, or what are we seeing financially with those responsibilities?
Yes, these programs are expensive. They're normal college tuition and usually plus a program fee, and that's for the extra supports. Our programs range from, I think UGA's program is somewhere in the mid, I think it's like $27,000 a year, all the way down to the quite affordable Albany Tech College, which is around $1,500 a year. But yes, every single year, every single semester, when I get reports from our schools, there's dropouts, and it's always due to lack of funding, lack of direct funding. We hear stories of students dropping out days before the college semester begins because they realize they don't have the funding for it, or students who unfortunately at the midway point through a year have to drop out because they have run out of funds. And our students are eligible for Pell funding, but they are not eligible for HOPE for a couple of different reasons. One of them being the GPA requirement. Our students don't receive GPAs when they're in college. They receive they're a different kind of system.
Thank you for this program. As a grandmother, my oldest grandson has Down syndrome, so I think this is excellent. Thank you.
Representative Glaze.
Thank you so much, Chair. I would love to ask if you could send us some information of the program, the overall outcomes, and mainly the workforce opportunities that many of these students, the 58%, have been able to connect to. I think this is something we would like to hail and talk about around the state. It's important, and I see an opportunity even to grow it. We're still having more students coming out of the pandemic with some of the disabilities now that are in this, those students are in this program, and we see that number probably growing in the future.
I would be happy to send you anything that you would like. I do have all of that information currently. I think Georgia Tech would be upset at me if I did not mention that their graduate employment rate is above 90%. So they're doing very well. That was not paid.
Representative Gaines, Vice Chairman of the Majority Caucus, you want to say anything about Georgia Tech while you're sitting there being from Athens?
This is one place where we actually think Georgia Tech's doing a good thing.
Yes, sir. Listen, we're gonna
No
have
offense.
to we're gonna have to wind up here. I know, Charlie. Thank you for being here as well. And sorry, there's a couple of wording. I think you have a great proposition. I think we want to work some details with you, specifically around language. And I talked to somebody earlier in the office about the 50%. I know what we're trying to get. I'm not sure that's exactly everybody's comfortable with. That's what that language says. So I think the immersion part we're on board, but it looks like we're going to have to force other people to enroll. I think we need to work on the language. So
All of ours in the state are at 50% or higher. So
no, I know, and I just want to make sure we capture that right into the language. So I'll get with Representative Gaines, and then we'll get you guys on the next time we meet again to work on this. Now we got some work to do in the meantime, and we may we do have to wind it up here at that. Did you want to have anything really quick?
No, I just want to say thank you. I will say there's a ton of families that are hearing about this legislation, are excited about it. It will make a difference for a lot of people throughout the state.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for doing that. And if you can stay there. To the members of the committee, I thank you. It's been a long meeting. I thank you for the engagement. Keep your eyes and ears open. We may have to meet again before next Wednesday. We're getting quite a few things that are coming through the committee here that may require us to try to find a day and to meet earlier that. With that, thank you for your time and attention to everybody in attendance. If there's no further business for the committee, we'll stand adjourned without objection. Hearing none, we are adjourned.